When the final explosion faded, and the void grew quiet again, the silence felt heavier than the battle itself. Wreckage of the enemy drifted like broken bones across the stars. Flames flickered and died inside shattered hulls, and the once mighty invaders were reduced to dust floating in the black. The alien council stood frozen in their chambers. Their people across the cities watched the skies with wide eyes. No one cheered, no one celebrated, for what they had witnessed was not a rescue but an extermination. The human fleet had ended the threat with terrifying speed, and yet the way they moved after the battle brought even greater fear. There was no sound of triumph, no signals of comfort. The Deathworlder ships simply reformed into flawless lines, their weapons still glowing faintly, their engines steady, their silence louder than any roar. The aliens whispered among themselves, wondering if the humans would now turn on them. Some cried that they should beg for mercy. Others warned that mercy was not in the nature of predators. Down in the streets, ordinary families hid in their homes, afraid to even look up. Children asked if the black ships would come down to their world, but their parents had no answers in the vastness of space. The human commanders spoke little. Orders were quiet, precise, and every crew member obeyed without hesitation. They had come, they had destroyed, and now they waited. The stillness of predators who had finished their kill, but had not yet decided if more blood was required. The aliens who had made the desperate call realized they had not been saved. They had only been spared, at least for now, and that thought chilled them more than any enemy fleet ever could. The aftermath was not peace. It was the weight of humanity's presence pressing down on their world, reminding them that they had awakened something that should have never been disturbed. At last, the silence broke, not with gunfire, not with destruction, but with a single voice that echoed across every channel in the system. Calm, steady, yet heavy enough to freeze every heart that heard it. The human commander's words were simple, translated into 1,000 tongues, but none of the meaning was lost. Do not summon us again, unless you are ready for war. There was no anger in the voice, no passion, only cold truth, like a sentence spoken by a judge whose decision could never be changed. In the council chamber, the aliens felt their knees weaken. Some fell against their chairs, others covered their faces, for the truth of the warning was clear. The Deathworlders had not come for them. They had not come to claim victory. They had not come for glory. They had only come because they had been called, and they had shown what that call truly meant. Above the planet, the human fleet began to shift, lines of dark steel breaking apart, engines glowing as they turned away from the world they had just saved, or perhaps spared. The citizens below watched in awe as the black silhouettes pulled back into the stars, their movement so precise and silent that it felt less like ships departing, and more like shadows fading into the night. Children pointed at the sky asking if the monsters were gone, but the elders knew better. The Deathworlders were never gone. They were simply waiting. As the last human ship vanished into the void, the planet exhaled, the council slumped in exhaustion, their relief poisoned by fear, because even though the invaders had been destroyed, the greater truth was carved into their hearts. Humanity was not a legend, not a myth, but real, alive and watching. The warning given to them was not just for their world, it was for all who lived in the galaxy. A promise that if anyone dared to cry out into the dark, humanity might answer, and that answer would never be gentle. Across the cities, the people spoke in whispers, some calling the Deathworlders saviors, others calling them destroyers, but none dared to deny their power. Fear settled like dust across the stars, spreading far beyond one system, for news of the battle would travel. Stories would be told and the galaxy would remember. The council sat in silence, their mistake burning in their minds. They had asked for mercy, but what they received was a lesson carved in fire. They had called humanity by mistake, and though the humans had left, their shadow remained. A shadow that promised that the next time the Deathworlder fleet answered, there would be no warnings, only war. In the council chamber of the alien world, the air grew heavy as days of silence dragged on. Their great signal had been sent with hope, but the lack of response only made the fear inside them grow stronger. Each passing moment felt like a shadow stretching longer across their hearts. Whispers filled the chamber as leaders argued in low voices. Some said perhaps no one had heard. Others said maybe their enemies had intercepted the message. But the most frightening thought came from an elder whose voice trembled as he spoke. What if the ones who answered were not the ones they prayed for? His words sent a shiver through the room. Old legends returned to their minds. Tales carried from system to system about a race born from a death world. Creatures who survived storms that tore mountains apart, who hunted beasts that would destroy entire cities, who had once risen into the stars and crushed enemies with merciless strength. They were called Deathworlders, and though many dismissed them as myths, the fear in their eyes showed the stories had never truly died. Still, the younger members of the council tried to push the thought away, insisting that peaceful allies would soon arrive. Yet their voices cracked under the weight of doubt. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open as a scout officer entered, his face pale, his hands shaking as he held out a data slate. The council rushed around him, their eyes widening as they saw the readings. Something enormous was moving at the edge of their system. Fleets so vast that the scanners struggled to measure them. Ships larger than their own cities. Formations tighter and colder than anything they had ever seen. The silence of the room was broken by gasps. Some stumbled back in fear, others tried to deny it. But the truth could not be erased. Their call had been answered, just not by the gentle races of mercy they had imagined. It had been heard by the ones they should have feared most. The Deathworlders were coming, and even before their ships appeared on the horizon, the aliens could feel their world trembling, as if the universe itself knew predators were on their way. The first sight of the fleet came like a nightmare rising out of the void. Alien sensors picked up the approaching wall of steel long before their eyes could see it. Their screens filled with shadows that grew larger with every passing second, and soon their windows trembled as dark shapes broke through the distant stars. Massive warships gliding in perfect silence, their hulls black and sharp, their movement so precise that the aliens thought for a moment they were looking at one single being, instead of countless ships. No banners flew, no music played, no warm words of greeting came across the channels. Only the cold static of human silence. The alien commanders huddled in fear, their mouths dry, their hearts pounding as they stared at the armada that dwarfed anything they had ever known. One whispered that perhaps these were protectors. Another snapped that protectors did not move like predators, for even without a single shot fired, the weight of the human fleet pressed down on them like a storm ready to break. The ships kept coming, carriers the size of moons, cruisers gliding like hunters in a pack, smaller escorts weaving between them like sharp knives, their formation so tight, so perfect, that it felt less like a fleet and more like a machine of war. The Alien Council sent frantic requests for communication, begging for answers, but no reply came. The humans only watched, their sensors sweeping across the system, calculating, observing, waiting. The aliens felt as if they stood under the gaze of something vast and merciless. The council chambers erupted in panic, some shouting to surrender, others crying that they had called upon monsters. But no one dared shut down the signal, for they knew it was too late. In the observation towers, ordinary citizens looked up at the sky and gasped as black silhouettes eclipsed their sun. Fear spread through the cities. Mothers pulled children inside. Elders whispered ancient warnings. And all across the planet, one thought echoed in their minds. They had summoned saviors, but what stood above them were executioners. The Deathworlder fleet hung over their world like judgment itself, silent, unblinking, unstoppable. And the aliens realized too late that their mistake had already sealed their fate. The silence of the system shattered when the true enemy finally arrived. Streaks of light tore through the void as the rival empire's fleet entered orbit. Their ships cruel and jagged, built for terror more than beauty. They came with confidence, certain that the weak council world would fall without resistance. Their commanders laughed as they broadcast their threats, promising destruction, enslavement, and fire. But their words died quickly, for when their sensors adjusted, they saw what truly waited for them. Not fragile defenders, not broken ships scrambling in panic, but the black wall of humanity. A fleet so massive it made their warships look like toys. The predators who thought themselves kings of this galaxy suddenly felt small. The alien invaders hesitated. Their engines slowed. Their bravado crumbled as the humans remained silent, motionless, weapons still cold but ready. The Deathworlders did not rush to answer the threats. They did not waste time with words. Instead, their formation shifted with deadly precision. Lines of ships turning in perfect synchronization until they blocked every escape route. The enemy realized too late that they had not walked into a battle. They had walked into a trap. The alien council who had sent the desperate call watched from their towers. Their fear now mixed with awe as they saw the impossible. The enemy they had dreaded for so long faced something far worse. The human fleet lit the void with cold fire, as thousands of weapons powered up. The stars themselves seemed to dim under the glow of human energy. Cannons charging. The invaders tried to scatter. Some tried to broadcast peace. Others roared defiance, but none of it mattered. The humans moved first. A storm of light cut across the black. Lances of plasma tearing through enemy shields as if they were paper. Missiles streaked silently and then bloomed into suns as enemy ships vanished in fire. The Deathworlder fleet moved with no hesitation, no pause, no mercy. Their formation flowed like a hunting pack, each kill efficient, each strike final. In minutes, the confidence of the enemy collapsed. Their commanders screamed orders. Their soldiers begged for survival. But there was no survival to be found, because the humans had not come as allies, not as negotiators, but as executioners answering a call they never ignored. And as the first wave of invaders burned to ash, the galaxy realized something terrifying. The Deathworlders had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The battle turned into a storm, unlike anything the alien council had ever imagined. The enemy fleet that once seemed unstoppable was ripped apart like fragile glass. Human warships moved with a rhythm that felt less like combat and more like a deadly dance. Every strike was precise. Every maneuver calculated. They did not waste fire. They did not toy with their prey. They destroyed with cold efficiency. Massive carriers unleashed swarms of smaller ships that darted between the enemy lines, tearing through their hulls with plasma fire. Cruisers unleashed beams that cut entire formations in half. Destroyers slammed missile after missile into the invaders until explosions lit up the void like a new constellation. The enemy screamed through the comms, voices filled with panic, begging for orders that no commander could give. Some tried to retreat but found every exit blocked. Some tried to charge forward but were met with a wall of firepower that reduced them to debris. One by one, their ships were silenced, until the battlefield became nothing but wrecks drifting in the dark. The council watched in horror and awe. Their people pressed against the windows of towers, staring at the night sky that had turned into a sea of burning wreckage. They had hoped for allies who would save them with kindness. But what they saw instead was raw, merciless survival. The Deathworlders fought not to defend, not to prove their strength, but to end the fight completely, to erase the enemy so no threat would remain. Mothers held their children close. Leaders whispered prayers, but deep inside all of them knew. This was no rescue, this was a warning. Humanity had answered their call, but in doing so, humanity had shown what it meant to come from a death world. No hesitation, no surrender, no mercy, only victory. As the last enemy ship exploded into silence, the galaxy itself seemed to pause. The void now filled not with danger, but with the heavy, terrifying presence of the human fleet, still calm, still watching, like predators who had fed but were far from satisfied. The aliens trembled, understanding at last why every whisper about humans ended the same way. When Deathworlders move, nothing survives in their path. The council chamber was filled with fear, their long, thin bodies shaking under the dim blue lights, eyes fixed on the ancient machine that carried their last hope. They had argued for hours, their voices rising and falling, some begging for surrender, some demanding resistance. But in the end, they all agreed. They would send a signal, a call into the stars, praying that someone stronger, kinder would hear them. The leader with trembling hands pressed the control. The signal rose like a silent scream into the void, carrying their plea for mercy, carrying their secret coordinates, carrying their desperate wish to survive. The chamber went quiet, every alien eye turning toward the ceiling as if they could watch the signal climb, their hearts heavy with both fear and hope. They thought of legends, of old races with wisdom, of gentle beings who might protect them, and they told themselves the universe would answer with kindness. Yet none of them could erase the shadow of doubt from their minds. Because once a signal is sent, it cannot be taken back. It travels endlessly until someone listens out in the endless dark. The signal drifted past dying stars and frozen worlds, through wrecks of old wars, through silent dust clouds where no sound had touched for 1,000 years. And it kept going, relentless, a cry in a universe that rarely answered with kindness. It was supposed to reach their neighbors in the core, an empire of scholars who spoke of peace. But a storm of energy bent its path, pulling it far off course, dragging it across the black, until at last the wrong ears heard it. Deep beneath Earth's oceans of data, human machines caught the call. Their silent monitors flashed red, their defenses stirred awake, and the words translated themselves into cold reports on human screens. The message was simple, a plea for help, yet the humans who read it did not smile. They did not whisper of mercy. Their eyes hardened because they knew. When someone cries for help in space, war is close behind in the alien council. Days passed, their moons rose and fell, and still they waited, no answer, only silence. And the silence was worse than rejection. They gathered again, whispering, asking each other if perhaps no one heard, or worse, if the wrong ones had. The younger ones trembled at that thought, because in the deepest layers of their history there were warnings, stories told not to frighten children, but to remind them of dangers too real. Stories of a race born on a death world, a planet where everything kills, where storms tear mountains apart and beasts never stop hunting. The stories said these beings had escaped their home and risen into the stars, not with hope, not with peace, but with fire. They were called Deathworlders, not as insult, but as truth. Survivors who had learned to endure anything. Fighters who never surrendered. But the council pushed away the memory, telling themselves those were myths, old stories twisted by fear. No such monsters would answer their signal. They wanted to believe in that lie, because it was easier than facing the truth on Earth. Far below the calm oceans and crowded cities, deep bunkers came alive, red lights flashing across long corridors. Warships in orbit received the alert, silent codes flowing from station to station. The call for help was marked not as request but as warning. Commanders gathered around dark tables, reading every line, their faces grim. No one spoke of hesitation. No one argued, because among humans there was no doubt what such a signal meant. If weak creatures cried for help, it meant stronger predators were already moving. And humanity did not wait for predators to arrive. Humanity prepared. Their fleet was massive. Black steel giants forged for war, each one bristling with weapons that could end empires. And as orders spread, crews rushed aboard, engines roared awake. The void of space shivered as Deathworlders answered, not with words but with movement. The aliens continued to wait, some trying to pray, some unable to sleep, their hopes holding them upright. None of them could see what was already in motion across the stars. None of them knew that their signal had awoken the most dangerous fleet the galaxy had ever seen. A fleet that did not speak first, a fleet that only acted. They thought they had reached out for a hand of mercy, but what they had truly done was knock on the door of predators. And predators had heard, and predators were already on their way. Silent, relentless, unstoppable. The mistake they had made could never be undone. Their plea had become a curse, and soon they would see why the name Deathworlder was whispered with both fear and awe, wherever the stars still burned. The fleet on Earth did not wait. The moment the signal was confirmed, every hidden base, every dark hangar, every orbital dock came alive. Men and women ran through steel corridors. Alarms echoed. Engines that had slept for months rumbled like giants awakening. Above the planet, silhouettes of massive warships turned, their black hulls reflecting no light, their weapons still silent but charged with an invisible threat. To the human commanders, this was not a rescue mission. This was preparation for war. No one asked who the aliens were. No one questioned if the call was real. They only followed orders because humans had learned long ago that hesitation in space meant extinction. The admirals gathered in the command hall, their eyes fixed on glowing maps of star systems, the signal's coordinates blinking red like a wound. Their faces did not show fear, only cold focus. One spoke of the possibility that this was a trap. Another reminded them that even if it was, humans never backed down. Decisions were swift. The fleet would move, not slowly, not carefully, but as a wall of steel and fire across the stars. In less than a day, hundreds of ships aligned, carriers larger than cities, destroyers with weapons to rip planets open, frigates moving like wolves beside them. Together they formed an armada the galaxy had not seen in centuries. Civilians on Earth looked up at the night sky and saw strange new stars rising. Not knowing they were engines burning against the void, whole continents shook as launch bays opened. Thunder spread across oceans as titanic ships climbed from the atmosphere, piercing clouds and vanishing into the silence above. In every ship, soldiers prepared, their faces calm, their weapons checked, their minds sharpened. They had no need for speeches, no need for promises, because every one of them understood what it meant to be human. They came from a world that had taught them to fight storms, to hunt beasts, to survive against odds that should have killed them. Now they carried that same spirit into the stars. The Deathworlder fleet was not just metal and fire. It was the reflection of humanity itself, a species that never surrendered, never forgave, and never forgot. And as the engines lit the darkness, the galaxy began to feel a shift. Far away in the alien council chambers, no one knew what was coming. They sat in silence, waiting for help, whispering prayers, while across the void a predator had already begun to move, faster than fear, colder than mercy. Unstoppable in its path, the Deathworlders had awakened, and their answer was on the way.